Michael Johnson.
Thank you. It's the best introduction I had all year. Year just started though. Let me first say thank you for having me here today. I am honored to be here with you today. Today I want to talk about the 10 characteristics of nonprofit leadership, and whether you're in the nonprofit space or not, I think it's still relevant to the work that you do in your space, or whether you volunteer for a nonprofit or not. Let me first talk a little bit about myself and why I got involved in the nonprofit sector. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up in probably one of the toughest public housing developments in the United States. I grew up in two public housing developments, one called the Abela Homes, which was on Roosevelt and Racine, and another one that's probably a little bit more known to folks outside of Chicago, a place called Cabrini Green. And this was a development that was infested with gangs, drugs, and prostitution. And I am thankful that God has given me grace to be able to stand here today and to be able to do this kind of work. And it did not hit me until about 15 years ago. I was asked to speak at the elementary school that I had graduated from. I was so excited that I think I was in my 20s at the time, and I had just took a job with Chicago Public Schools, and the guy who was the principal when I was a kid was still the principal. And he said, "Why don't you come and give the commencement speech?" And I had never been asked to speak ever. I took that assignment so seriously, I literally wrote a 50-page speech that I was about to give to a bunch of 8th graders. So I remember walking in the building, and they still had all of our 8th grade graduation pictures on the wall. And I remember going there excited to literally being in tears, because out of the 23 young men that had graduated with me, as of today, only 4 of us are still alive. So the 4 of us got together and we said, why were we giving grace? And it was 4 things that we all had in common. One, we were all members of after-school programs that kept us busy, kept us engaged, kept us out of trouble. We all came from single-family households. We had mothers who were a force to be reckoned with. 3, we all had jobs. We were working at a very young age, where it was individuals like you that took a chance on us and employed us while we were young, which kept us off the streets and kept us out of trouble. And then the 4th one, we all had mentors. And most of our mentors was connected to institutions like this, service clubs, communities of faith that was tied in our lives. So I decided that I was going to dedicate the rest of my career, that I was going to go to school and get a bunch of business degrees so I could learn how to run a nonprofit, be effective at it, but at the same time impact people's lives. So I've spent the last 20 years, 10 years here in Dane County, running the Boys and Girls Club here. Before that, I was the Deputy Commissioner of Parks and Recreation in Philadelphia, which is one of the largest park systems in the country. I ran a psychiatric children's hospital in Indianapolis, and I also was a vice president for the YMCA's in St. Louis. So today, I want to talk to you about leadership in the nonprofit space, and we can go to the next page. Let me tell you a little bit about the industry itself. There are 1.5 million nonprofits in the United States, which means these are nonprofits that need individuals like you that can help govern those organizations, support those organizations, and we're a pretty big sector, and a lot of people don't realize that. If the nonprofit sector was a country, we would have the 16th largest economy in the United States, with over $1.7 trillion in revenue across the United States. We also have 1 in 10 jobs that come from the nonprofit sector in the United States. Our nonprofit workforce is the largest of all U.S. Industries behind retail, trade, and manufacturing. And sometimes when people look at nonprofits, they look at, this is a group that got their hands out. But we have a direct economic impact to the role that we play in our individual communities, in our state, in our region, and also in our country. If you look at Wisconsin specifically, over 30,000 nonprofits in this state that generated $49 billion in revenue or assets, and over 90 billion in the assets, I mean. And that 2.7 billion was actually given to those charities. So we are a very giving community, a very philanthropic state that cares about the welfare of those who need it the most. But then if you look at in Dane County, we have our fair share of challenges here that we have to address. As rich as our state is, as our state is thriving in so many ways, but we have our fair share of challenges that we have to address. The fact that we used to have one of the largest racial achievement gaps in the United States, we now have the largest racial achievement gap in the United States, and it's unacceptable for a state that has so much in our community. Then if you look in our backyard, 1 in 6 kids live in poverty. The average age of a homeless person in Dane County is what? Anybody know? Somebody take a shot. 28. Anybody else? 23? Who said 9? 8 years old is the average age of a homeless person in our county. Totally unacceptable. So it makes you wonder, when you look at the demographic of kids that's not graduating, not going on to college, how can you go to school and thrive if you don't have adequate housing? So that's an issue that we have to deal with. We also know that 1 in 9 kids skip meals and don't have adequate nutrition when they go home at night. We also live in a community where only 36% of our kids can read at proficiency. Is totally unacceptable. I was one of those kids. I graduated from the lowest performing high school in the state of Illinois, Krieger Vocational High School, and there was nothing vocational about it. I graduated, got a football scholarship, went to University of Minnesota, and took a bunch of bogus courses like Introductory to Wrestling. And I can't even believe they let me take those courses, and I couldn't even pass those. Came back, enrolled into a junior college in Chicago. It took me 4.5 years to get an associate's degree, and that's when I learned that I could not read and write at proficiency. So it had to take 2.5 years of courses before they even allowed me to take collegiate courses at a junior college. And the fact that only 36%, it's all kids, white kids, black kids, Latino kids, 36%, this should be a crisis in our community, and it's something that we have to address. If you look at the numbers around reading proficiency, 3 in 5 Caucasian kids can read at proficiency, 1 in 4 for American Indian, 1 in 5 for Hispanic, and then 1 in 10 for African Americans. So just wanted to share those numbers with you. Then if you look at low income young people during the summer months, there's a reading loss. So when kids are out of school, we should be investing in literacy to make sure that our young people can read and can write and be prepared for the workforce. We know in the United States that only about 27% of working age adults have college degrees. So we should be preparing our kids for college and/or careers and creating a pathway for them out of high school, and we got to do a better job in this community around that. 14% of those kids that do graduate, only 14% of low-income kids would graduate within 8 years. It took me about 9 years to get my bachelor's degree, so I know that number is real, and I'm going to talk about how we as an organization has begun to address these issues with third-party data to back up the work that we're doing. So back in 2012, we created a bold strategic plan that would, and now my board next week is going to approve the second version of that, because we've pretty much hit about 90% of our goals in the first one that we created in 2012. And I'm going to talk about some of the things we did and then talk about how we got there from the characteristics of leadership. Our goal was to help close the opportunity gap in Madison. 2, we wanted to expand our impact, so we wanted to grow from serving 1,800 young people to 10,000 young people in southern Wisconsin. We wanted to grow our human capital, we wanted to diversify our revenue, and have a profound impact on the lives of thousands of young people in our community. So let me talk a little bit about, if you go to the slide, so we went from 1,800 members in 2010 in 2 locations to 7,500 young people in 11 locations, which include school-based sites and 3 traditional clubs, and then we just built a $3 million club in Sun Prairie that's scheduled to open next week. We grew our workforce from 18 employees to now this is 175 employees in 2020. We went from 12,000 donors, we went from 2,000 donors when I started to now over 17,000, and we've grown our donor support by a bunch of people giving us $25 to be able to support our work. We have more than 50 paid tutors that's in schools, in the classrooms, with teachers during the school day that make sure our kids can read, they can write, and that they're taking rigorous courses. And I'm going to talk about how we've helped over 1,000 young people graduate from the Madison in the Verona School District and go on to college, and how we're tracking that. We provided 600 paid internships for young people, working with individuals like you to give young people paid work experiences. We provided 165,000 meals and snacks to kids in our locations, making sure that when kids come into our clubs, that they can get a healthy, nutritious meal every single day, like the one that you and I get when we get home. So we have full-time chefs that's working in our clubs every day to make sure our kids can eat. We've also put a fitness facility in all of our clubs to make sure that parents and kids and their families can take advantage of weight equipment, because that's an access barrier and a cost barrier for families to participate in some of the local gyms. There's 4,000 Boys and Girls Clubs across the country. We were named one of the top 5 in the United States. The only guy that I can't seem to beat, his father is the owner of the New England Patriots, and his son is the president of the Boys and Girls Club in Boston. So I'm trying to catch up with him, but I just don't have the Rolodex that his family has. We provide transportation to over 200 kids. We acquired a nonprofit in Delavan. We built a dental clinic inside of one of our Boys and Girls Club. We're one of the only nonprofits that's a licensed child care facility. We've created the largest public-private partnership in both the Madison and the Verona schools. We raise $2 million every year to make sure that our kids graduate and go on to college and persist. We receive a 4-star Charity Navigator rating, which means that only 20% of nonprofits in the United States get 4 stars, and we're one of them here in Dane County. And then I talked about the opening of the new club. In terms of membership and our impact, and I'm going to get to what I'm supposed to talk about. We grew from 1,800 members to 7,200. Our revenue have grown from when I started, we were 1.1 million. After my first year, we went from 1.3 million. This year, we ended at 6.7. Next year, we'll be at about 8.1, 8.2. Phenomenal growth for a nonprofit. If you look at our impact, we've placed 828 kids in college since 2010. If you go Google, don't take my word for it, you will hear that UW-Madison does a third-party assessment. And that assessment shows that our kids' GPAs are higher, their attendance is better, and I'm not talking about 10 or 15 kids. Last year we graduated 300 kids, and every last one of them went to college, every last one. Then you look at our Avid Top Scholars. We have kids enrolled in 61 colleges and universities. We've now hired college coaches that's helping these young people persist. We're the only nonprofit that has staff at UW-Madison, staff that work at UW College and staff that work at Edgewood College, making sure that we're providing coaching, support to ensure that our young people are persistent in graduating. So now, that's my experience in this marketplace. We didn't get there because I was able to do this work by myself. It took humility, it took leadership, it took bringing people on board to help create a strategic plan and a vision to help young people thrive in this environment. And there was 10 things that I had to reflect on as we were looking to grow our organization and to grow our impact. One, as a board, if you're a member of a board, you have fiduciary responsibility of that organization. You're responsible for hiring and supporting and firing the CEO. And so one of the things I had to make sure is that as I had came on board, that I grew our board and that we were strategically aligned. Two, you gotta have a passion for the work that you do, whether it's in a nonprofit space or if you're in sales. If you're not passionate about what you do, it's gonna reflect in your demeanor and reflect your outcomes in terms of the work that you do. You got to empower your team and your volunteers to be able to execute with a plan and with purpose. 4, you got to keep up with trends and be able to effectively communicate. 5, you got to attract and recruit a diverse workforce. And I think that's very critical, especially in this marketplace. I always hear people say, well, it's hard to find people of color, or it's hard to find women, or hard to find whatever. If you look at our team at Boys and Girls Club, you see young, you see old, you see Christian, you see atheist, you see black, white, Latina, and all these different folks come with different, we all come with like an implicit bias because we all come from different communities, but we all come with different ideas. I've learned to embrace those ideas and to embrace those experiences, and I think because of that, it has made our organization stronger. Showing confidence and humility. Anytime you're leading people, especially if you're public or you're leading people, you're gonna have to show humility. There will be people that will challenge you, as you know, in your workplace, whether you're in sales or in RD or in marketing, and I'm gonna talk a little bit about each one of these. Having a positive attitude and long-term vision, being persistent and financially astute, inspiring others to achieve greatness, and then being accountable, transparent, and then ultimately, my role as a CEO is to raise money for our organization. So if you don't know how to raise resources, your nonprofit will not thrive and not be able to make the kind of impact that you're looking for. I always tell my team, if there's no margin, there's no mission. You could have all the great ideas in the world, but if you can't finance it and fuel it, you're not gonna be impactful. So let's talk about the first one, board and executive alignment. One of the things that we do at Boys and Girls Clubs, and even if it's a private company, if you have a board, family board, what's the role of the board? What is their responsibility? How do you hold them accountable? So I have a governance structure of 100 people. There's 30 members on my board, and then in our committees, there's about 70 people. We do a report card on every last one of them. So we don't want people on our board just to have their names. We want their time, their talent, and their treasure, and we measure them on it. And our board manages that process to ensure that there's accountability at that level. 2, I meet every 2 weeks with my board leadership. Right before I came in here, I was sitting in the parking lot for 45 minutes going over the board agenda. Did somebody see me coming in? I see somebody shaking their head. I was sitting in the parking lot for 45 minutes on a phone conference with my board chair and vice chair going over the board agenda to make sure that we're aligned. So having those conversations to make sure, whether it's your board chair or your supervisor, keeping him and her in the loop in terms of the work that you're doing. Being able to work in committees. A lot of nonprofits struggle in this space. A lot of times the boards are trying to do all the work. I decided if I build up that's why it's 70 people on our committees. It's that small army that provides intellectual capital, that small army that provides political support on those committees, and it helps advised, there's 11 VPs in our organization. Those board members and committee members act as advisors and a support system as we look to navigate and do work in our community. Then we have what we call performance standards and annual reviews. I helped a woman in Georgia. I spoke at a conference. She ran a $40 million organization. And she was telling me how she became a CEO, worked her way up the chain, but she hadn't had a raise in 3 years. The board never did a review on her. So long story short, I did a board comp analysis. I did an analysis of what other CEOs were making in the region, and she was about $45,000 a year underpaid. And so as a board, you are responsible for making sure that you're doing annual reviews on your CEO, and if you're a CEO or a line manager, you should be doing individual reviews on your employees. So for example, I worked for a guy by the name of Paul Vallis, who was probably one of the most respected urban school superintendents in the country. I followed him from Chicago to Philly, and I loved working for him because at the beginning of every year, he made it clear we negotiated what the expectations were. And I remember at the end of the year, I knew what my performance review was going to be because he was clear on what the expectations are. We have to do that for members of our team, so you got the right people on the bus moving in the same direction. You're providing that support and those standards for them. And then being able to do a strategic plan. I would tell you that it's critical. We're wrapping up one right now that lays out what our roadmap to the future is over the next 5 years. And it's a process where we had to do a SWOT analysis. We had to interview about 100 people. We had teams of people meeting and getting feedback from them. But now we got a plan that all of our stakeholders are excited about, and we're gonna raise a significant amount of money for kids in this community, change a bunch of lives, and engage people in a way where our community is going to be better because of a plan that we collectively put together. Number 2, passion for the organization and mission. I once heard a pastor say, if you are passionate about your work, you will never ever work a day in your life. I would tell you, I let somebody pull me away from this organization once, and it was United Way. And I've probably gotten about 10 job offers since I've been here in the private sector, other nonprofits. But I gotta tell you, when I went to United Way, it was a $60 million nonprofit, which meant I had to raise $60 million a year and give it away. And what I love about this work, I get to do stuff like this. I get to go talk to young people. I get up every single day excited and fired up about this work. So I would encourage you, or if you got kids, or you're looking at a career change, if you're not excited about going to work every day, it's going to reflect in what you do. And so I've learned, I'm going to talk about self-care at the end. Over the years, I worked so much that I neglected myself in the process, and I'm going to talk about that at the end. Number 3 is empowering your team of volunteers to execute with purpose. Good leaders never take credit for the work that others do. I never take credit for the success we've had at Boys and Girls Club. I always make sure that I'm acknowledging key stakeholders, whether it's our board or our VPs, our direct care staff, letting them know that we see them, we recognize them, we support them, that we empower them. We have monthly goals tied to annual strategic plan. So when we meet with a purpose, like our board agenda is laid out by our strategic priorities. So we're focused on that work to ensure that we're meeting with a purpose. And then we delegate authority, and we ensure that our people are trained to make decisions. In the nonprofit space, I would tell you most nonprofits don't have training directors, don't have a training department. And so part of our strategic plan moving forward is to help nonprofits with that space. It's an issue that's in our industry that we have to deal with. Communication and keeping up with new trends. Whether you're in the nonprofit space or in a different space, got to know how to communicate both internally and externally, messaging plans with timelines. A lot of people, if anybody follow me, I'm on social media a lot. We're in the news probably two to three times a week here in Madison. And some people are critical about that, but guess what? I don't apologize for it. Because when you got to raise resources for kids, I'm not going to apologize by keeping my organization relevant. So we write op-ed pieces. We respond to critical issues in the community. When there's challenging issues going on, we sometimes get called on, and sometimes we insert ourselves when we feel we need to. And as a result, when the community has been a blessing to our organization because we put ourselves out there. But as a leader, it also be people take shots at me as a leader. There's some people that I think love me in this community, and there's some people that probably wish I never came back from Cincinnati. And I'm okay with that, because if everybody loves the work that you do, you're probably not leading, and so the right way. So I would say make sure that internally that you're communicating with your team, you're putting together messages, and you got people involved. When we promote stuff on social media, it's pretty much planned out for the year. A lot of people don't know that. We put together a marketing plan. We know what we're going to communicate in January, February, all the way through December. And there's sometimes we ad-lib, but for the most part, we strategically plan it out. And even when we announce new initiatives, we put together communication plans internally to make sure that our internal staff and our stakeholders are part of those conversations. Number 5, I won't go through all those, is attracting and recruiting a diverse workforce. Be intentional about recruiting people of color and other groups, whether it's women. Like when we do it, even with our board, we do a board gap analysis. So we don't bring people on our board just because, oh, that's Joe Blow, the president of such and such company. We do a gap analysis, and we say, okay, we have this certain skill set. We look at age, we look at race, we look at gender, and we look at the type of skills that our board members have. Then if we have gaps, we go out and say, okay, we have a gap in IT. Like this is the one we just had, and we brought on some new people. We needed more women on our board. We needed somebody with IT, and we needed millennials. Most of our board members were 45 years and up. So that was a gap. So we were very strategic in terms of who we wanted to invite on our boards and our committees. And I would implore you to do the same thing. I would never hire somebody based on the color of their skin. But what you got to do is make sure that you're being very, very intentional in terms of where you're recruiting people at. Who's on the interviewing committee to ensure that you're building a diverse pipeline into your organization. Number 6, showing confidence and humility. When you're a leader, sometimes you got to show and demonstrate small victories so people can have confidence in your leadership. I always, when we have a victory, I celebrate it. I tell everybody in our organization, but at the same time, when there's issues, I try to seek understanding instead of being understood. And in this day and age of social media, we clash so hard because people don't seek understanding. We're just like, this is my view, this is your view, and we clash. And so I've learned as a nonprofit executive is to sometimes just sit back, fall back, and just listen and hear the other perspective. It has helped me a lot as I've helped lead different initiatives in this community. And then I would say be vulnerable. Be vulnerable. If you don't know, it's okay if you're a leader. I try to hire people who are a lot smarter than me in their specific subject area. So be vulnerable and be willing to listen. Number 7, being positive and having long-term vision. Nobody wants to be around a Debbie Downer. So if you're at work all day, oh, things just ain't great. Things ain't gonna never get great. Who wants to follow somebody like that? But if you got vision and you're excited about your work and you're ready to move, you'll be surprised who will follow you. But also, those same people, like yesterday, my team was challenging me in our leadership team meeting yesterday. And there was about our strategic plans. I'm like, add this. And then they were like, well, we got to be concerned about infrastructure. You got to think about that. And when we think about a vision, it can't just be your vision. It has to be a vision that your team support because they might be covering your blind side. So staying positive, creating that vision to help create, make your organization, your department better and stronger. Being persistent and being financially astute. I would tell you one of the best things I could have done. That's why I went to school. I had a business. When I was 18, I was fortunate. I wrote this story. When I was a student at the University of Minnesota, the coaches had dressed up in Ku Klux Klan outfits. And they took me down this dark cornfield road and pretended to be the KKK. So I immediately dropped out of school and I sued the university and I won $1 million. And I blew it all in 6 months. And it was probably one of the most devastating time periods in my life. I was 18, I had all this cash, I tried to do the right thing, I opened up a record label, I bought a restaurant, and I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know anything about financial planning, forecasting, just didn't know it. I failed miserably. And I remember when I had my last $1,000, I had closed my restaurant down, and I went in business with this guy, and he was bringing guns in the restaurant, so I bought him out, and I closed my restaurant down for 3 weeks and came back, and it was on Madison and Karloff on the west side of Chicago. Somebody came in and took everything out my restaurant except but this. My mother was a super religious woman. There was a picture, when I first bought the restaurant, she put this big picture of white Jesus on my office door. They stole everything except but that big white picture of Jesus. And I remember walking in and I wanted to commit suicide. I was like, I am a failure. I can't believe I blew through $1 million. And I remember sitting there crying, and I remember this vein in my arm, and I remember like poking it with a knife, and that picture of white Jesus was just looking at me and was like, I got a plan for you. And I remember sitting there just crying, and I went and enrolled in Malcolm X College the next day, and that started my journey. So I said, I'm gonna get all my degrees in business so I can have the business acumen to know how to run a nonprofit. So I would tell you, if you're leading, learn your financial controls, learn how to do budget forecasting, learn your variances, and learn how to read budgets. It will make you a stronger manager and a leader. 2, train all your managers to do the same thing. 3, I always tell our team, if there's no margin, there's no mission. There will be times where you will lose on some things, but we try to budget very conservative to make sure that we're leaving a margin and making sure that our organization is healthy so we can be more impactful. You must persist even when your doors is closed. Don't be distracted by doubts. I would tell you, when you're leading and when you're making critical decisions, there will always be doubters. And I would say, again, listen, but at the end of the day, if you're leading, you gotta lead and move on. All great things also takes time. The success that we've had has taken us 10 years to get to that point. Inspire others to achieve, inspire people to work together and do something that's greater than themselves. I would give an example. I used to get criticized because people would say, why is Boys and Girls Clubs delivering water in Flint, Michigan? Why is Boys and Girls Club taking 6 or 7 semi-truckloads to Oklahoma when there was a tornado there? Why is Boys and Girls Clubs going to Houston? Why are you spending Boys and Girls Club money on that? And I used to hear this from some of our stakeholders. And I said, you know what? God put it on my heart. I remember when the hurricane happened in Houston, I saw on CNN, it was a group of old white women that was sitting in this nursing home. I don't know if anybody remember this photo, and the water had raised up to like the top of there. Anybody remember that picture? You remember that? I remember seeing that photo. I was like, we got to do something. And I just simply went to social media and said, I want to go to Houston in the next 48 hours. And this community responded. I didn't spend any of Boys and Girls Club money. We went down there with almost $200,000, 7 semi-truckloads of items that this community collected, and we went down there. So you think, man, that was a good thing. But people were critical and were like, well, that's not part of the mission of Boys and Girls Club. So I went back to our board. I said, can we take Dane County out of our mission statement? So if families need us in Texas or Houston and our community allow us to do it, we go. And as a result of that, I think Boys and Girls Club benefited from it because we got to meet a lot of people in the process. So that's what I talk about, inspiring others greater than what your cause might be. And then the final one is number 10 is accountability, transparency, and also fundraising. Personal accountability around outcomes. I told my team yesterday, we had a chart. So we have a 66-point plan that we have to, that's part of our strategic plan over the next 5 years. But part of our business plans, each department also have their 66 goals. So somebody said, I noticed when my VPs put theirs, I said, you all don't have me leading anything. So one of the VPs said, well, you're the CEO, you kind of support us. I said, no, actually, I like that, but at the end of the day, I'm responsible for all the outcomes in this organization. And I tell my board, as the chief executive, I take responsibility for that. Now, I want to hold my VPs accountable and my line managers accountable, and there's tools and ways of how you do that, but you got to take responsibility for the good and the bad in the organization. I don't throw any of my people under the bus. When something bad happened at Boys and Girls Club, I take full responsibility for it. Now, if somebody did something, they're going to take responsibility too, but as the executive, whether it's your department, you're responsible for both the good and the bad. Communicate and show results, whether it's good or bad. When we have good results, we show it. We have bad results, we show it. Yeah, that's about being transparent and honest about the condition of your organization, and then being accountable. And then the final one, I would say, if you go to the PDF, is self-care. I would tell you, being an African-American leader in this community can be challenging sometimes. So one of the things I learned when I first came here, Boys and Girls Club, we couldn't make payroll, so there was internal issues going on. And then people were like, hey, we want you, that's it right there. And then after that, I'll explain. So I joined about 18 boards and committees my first year. And I picked up about 100 pounds, about 120 pounds. So in this last year, I said, I want to lead and I want to take care of myself first. So in the last 6 months, I dropped from a 6X shirt down to a 2X big. I've dropped 88 pounds. I went from a 62 waist to now, I'm either 46 or 48 now. Had my blood work done, and all my blood work came back clean except for my cholesterol. So I've now been on a plant-based diet for the last 8 days, and I'm hoping over the next 3 months my cholesterol levels are normal. I said to say, if you're not taking care of yourself, how can you lead and take care of others and lead in a very thoughtful and innovative way? And over the years, like this year was probably our most successful year. So over the last, I did this in 7 months, the way I've dropped. So as a result, my family, if I can go to the next one, we together lost 222 pounds in 6 months. So that's my wife. When I started getting healthier, she got healthier, and she now runs faster than me, do more sit-ups than me, and so she now encourages me, and we're now watching what we eat. My son is a football player now. He lost 47 pounds, and he's more cut. That's an older picture now. He's ripped because he's watching what he's putting in his body. And then his last picture is my daughter, and she's lost about 30 pounds. So I say all that to say that there's balance when you lead, taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, and making sure you put yourself first. My first meeting was at 8 o'clock this morning. My first commitment to myself, I was at Carbon World Health at 6:01. And every morning I do that now. I spend 2 hours working on me to make sure that I could be the healthiest version of me, so I can give of my time, give of my talent, and give the treasure that God has blessed me with to be a benefit to others. And so whatever issue that you could be dealing with, whether it's weight, could be mental health, It could be a sexual addiction, whatever it is, figure it out, how to address it to make sure that you could be the healthiest version of you so you can lead with power and go out and do great things in this community.